Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, March 26th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 157 days, the game against Michigan in 248 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. All right, we're in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Tom Orr, joined by Tony Gerdeman. Just get a chance to talk to Larry Johnson and sort of a smattering of the defensive linemen. Not all projected starters, some guys it was kind of an interesting mix of guys, a lot of veterans though, so I think that was sort of the through line for a lot of it. I'll let you choose, because there's a bunch of different, CJ Hicks I know is like the big topic of interest. Edric Houston is sort of the guy who's maybe coming on the fastest. Logan George is the new guy who is like the international man of mystery, even though Idaho's not technically international. So you choose. We'll do a choose your adventure. To talk about Logan George, turn to page 17. To talk about CJ Hicks, turn to page 43.
Why not page 11?
That's you know what?
Let's talk about CJ Hicks.
I don't want to put numbers on guys.
So, you mentioned the 157 days until Texas. As we speak with these players, it is 158 days because CJ Hicks also talked about 158 days because he was asked, do you feel, this is your last year, do you feel pressure to make everything work at defensive end? And he's like, yeah, there's pressure, but there's also time. There's 158 days till Texas. And it's like, why do you know this? And it's like, we talk about it every day. So we talked about this yesterday, yes. But where this is not a rallying cry, but it's just like, hey, that's out there. Texas is, every single day they talk about it, so they need to be ready because Texas is certainly pointing towards Ohio State and wanting to be ready. So I just think that part was interesting. But overall, spending a lot of time with Larry Johnson, Matt Patricia after practice, working on all of the little things, and he's going to have to get better at run stopping, and they've had pads on for 2 days, so that still has yet to be developed, and that's not necessarily something that will happen in great portions in the spring with the way they're planning to do it. But everybody's upbeat about him. We saw while some of these interviews were going on, Matt Patricia had him back there, and they were working on hands and steps and things like that. So he's taking it all in because he knows it is his last year. But also, Tom, there's still well over 150 days to be ready.
For sure, and we'll keep you abreast of that situation as it develops as that game gets a little closer. He did say right before you walked up, he did say that he thinks this fits his play style more, lets him be more aggressive. Now he's just working on getting off the ball, holding the edge in the run. He's 240 pounds or so right now. Thinks he might get to 245 or so by the start of the season. Does love Coach Patricia. Said. Patricia maybe kind of pointed to Willie McGinnis as someone who might be sort of a comp for him, or this might be a guy you could sort of be like. And he said he actually has worked with Willie McGinnis, but it was at one of those camps when he was a high school junior, and he was an off-ball guy at that point, so it was all different stuff. But he has actually worked with him a little bit.
Well, and Dan Hope from 11 Warriors asked him, when you does the example of Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter at Penn State, that move from linebacker to defensive end, does that give you some encouragement? He's like, yeah, but he said it does, but I'm my own player. And then Tim May's like, yeah, but you wear number 11. Just like those two guys did. So it's like,
it's true. Yes. Yeah, it's true. So, all right. So let's move on now from CJ Hicks to Logan George, because I do think he's sort of I feel like you kind of have a little bit of a sense for the starting four. You kind of know what you got with Kenyatta Jackson. You kind of know what you got with Caden Curry and Caden McDonald and Edric Houston, and we'll talk about those guys a little bit. Logan George is a little bit of a mystery right now because he came from the FCS level. Larry Johnson talked about the fact that he knew Logan George from the same high school as Tommy Togiai, so knew some of the same people. So you kind of have a sense for who he is. That's still a really big jump from Idaho State to Ohio State.
Well, and especially when you look at the defense they played in, which is a 3-3-5 stack, where he plays defensive end, but so much of his movement is attacking the center and the guard, or the guard and the tackle. He's not outside much at all, unless it's a passing down and they let him go out there. But so there's a learning process of this kind of defense. But he talked about being able to learn from watching Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau during the last couple of bowl games, so that's a pretty good example. He was asked, so when did Ohio State call, and what was that like? He's like, I was on my way to dinner, my phone rang, there's Larry Johnson, it was amazing, and then somebody else said, so I bet it was a pretty good dinner. He's like, oh, it was a really good dinner. So very excited about that. And, he's like C.J. Hicks, soaking it all in because, he's still got a couple of years. Like he's a redshirt junior now, I believe.
Yep.
So he's got 2 years, but this learning process, all of this spring is about learning so that when fall camp starts, he can be a contributor.
Yeah, and it feels to me like contributor this year, bigger role / starter next year is probably a reasonable track for him. When you bring in a multi-year guy, that really changes the expectations a little bit on what you're going to get year one. Yeah, he's definitely an interesting person to watch on that line. Someone else I think is probably near the top of my list of guys I'm most interested in seeing this year and like what they're going to do in their new roles is Edric Houston. Edric Houston is he ended up so far ahead of, and also in a different place than I expected him to as a true freshman. And on the defensive line, that is not a place where you normally see that. So to see it, and then to see him take on an actual role as 3-tech on a team that won the national championship as a true freshman, now I'm looking at the sophomore year and going, all right, what do we get? What's Act 2 here?
Yeah, no kidding. He moved from number 6 defensive end to number 4 defensive tackle, which I think it's a little bit of a statement about the position group at the defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. But also, he was then playing, and it took him all of about a week and a half to become to go from defensive end to defensive tackle. He did that during the bye week, and I asked him, did you feel pressure to be ready for that game, knowing okay, I've got 1 week to get this, and I need to know all my lines, and when the music hits, I got to be ready. I got to solo.
I got to do the square dance. Yeah.
And he was like, there was no pressure because Coach Jay told him, we'll go when you're ready. So I thought that was interesting. But and you saw the snaps kind of rise and go on from the early stages, and he said it fits his game being a 3-tech because he can use his speed. He's a pass rusher, feels very comfortable. He said, "I just want to help the team, whatever it takes. I'm going to do it." And that's one of the things that Ryan Day talks about in recruiting, where you got to recruit the guys that can handle the culture, and that's part of being part of the culture is willingness to move. And he's a guy that was one of the 5-star defensive end. Why should I move anywhere?
Yeah.
He's like, I'll move wherever. And so he's going to be fun to watch. I'm interested. I asked Larry Johnson, how does he compare to Draymond Jones? He's like, well, it's too early for that. I don't want to get into that. But those are both 2 big defensive ends that moved to defensive tackle right pretty early in their careers. And as a redshirt freshman, Draymond Jones was ridiculous. But I'm not expecting. Well, I don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to expect any kind of season like Draymond Jones had in 2016. But I think he's going to make some plays this year.
Yeah, for sure. And when you're talking about Larry Johnson, sort of reassuring him, that kind of goes back to one of the things we hear Larry Johnson talk about a lot over the years, which is you want guys to be in there when they're ready. There's not a rush. You're going to put them in a situation where they're going to succeed. And so you're not going to just throw a guy in and it's like, well, good luck out there. Larry Johnson has made a very consistent thing over the years to wait until you have a situation. Chase Young. When Chase Young was a freshman, he was out there, but he was out there in situations where Chase Young, as a true freshman, could succeed. That's something that Larry Johnson has gotten very good at, it seems like, over the years. And so, not surprising that you saw Edric Houston out there succeeding when he was out there. It was more, to me, a surprise to see him out there because that felt like Larry Johnson felt like, wow, This guy can already succeed at a different position as a true freshman.
Right. Because, he could have very easily put Tywone Malone out there instead,
sure.
and it was Eddrick Houston.
And he did mention Tywone Malone. He was asked about Tywone Malone. He talked about the fact, the same thing that you always hear when you bring up Tywone Malone, which is, well, he was a baseball player for a couple of years, so that really set him back. It sounds like now, okay, maybe you're finally through that and you're sort of caught up, so maybe this is a little bit more of an opportunity there. Jason Moore was someone he talked about, just he's finally getting more reps. He just needs to play more, needs to do something with it, but he is finally getting the opportunity. Now he's got to capitalize on that. Let's go back to the kind of starters on the defensive line, presumptive starters on the defensive line. Kenyatta Jackson. He was not out here for very long, but he's quick in a lot of things that he does at that defensive end position.
Well, and we've talked over the last month or so about how we keep hearing the kind of leader that he is of the defensive line room now, and he was talking about that. And one of the points of being a leader is you have to lead different guys different ways, and knowing how to lead that. That's something he learned from Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. I can't lead Caden McDonald the same way I lead Logan George or the same way I lead Eddrick Houston. So I thought that was interesting where you've got just stuff that you would never even think about. Like, I can't yell at this guy. I can yell at this guy. This guy needs this kind of encouragement. This guy needs that kind of encouragement. And the fact that all of this matters to you, like this is your leader. And it's just interesting to watch him talk about that because this is a guy who he played quite a bit last year, but has never played as much as like he had a roadblock with the two guys in front of him, and he hasn't let that stop him from being a leader. And him, Caden Curry, like they're all excited about finally the horizon is here. They've reached it, and they're ready to go.
Yeah, and this is not a comp in terms of what the outcome is going to be, but it feels like the year where you had like the guys who were behind Pete Werner and Tuff Borland and those guys, like, that didn't pan out for several of those guys, but it was like the year where it was like, okay, finally these guys who've been multi-year starters at all three positions, they're finally gone, and now we can go take that, you have that opportunity. Doesn't mean you're going to capitalize on it, but it means that opportunity's there. Caden McDonald is someone who, he did not come out and talk, but
which was disappointing because
he's always a good talker. Also turning into a pretty good football player. He's another guy who was very young, redshirt freshman last year, right? Redshirt freshman.
I think he was a sophomore.
Was he a sophomore?
He played
Okay.
so much.
So second-year player last year. He was someone who you saw in there, even with the veteran guys, the veteran defensive line. You saw him in these crucial moments. Goal line stand against Penn State. There's Caden McDonald right in the middle of everything. Saw him play a bunch during the playoffs. He's another guy who. He's kind of in that Edric Houston camp with me, where it's like, all right, he did not come in with quite the hullabaloo that Edric Houston did, but he's someone who it feels like, okay, what is he going to look like getting 40, 50 snaps?
Yeah, because he's played each of the first 2 years, and then the way people talk about him, like not us, but like the way his teammates talk about him, the way Ty Hamilton talked about him at the combine, saying, Caden's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. Like you can go to the combine, who's going to replace you? How's it going to go? Caden's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And he's big, he's energetic, he's athletic, and you hear people talk like there's the level of confidence that they have in him. I think speaks. It's not nothing because that's one thing where they'll talk about somebody, but when there's like this level of confidence, like there's no concern here. They're going to be okay.
Well, and when you ask about a specific player and get an answer about that player, that's one thing. When you ask about something broadly and you get a very specific answer about that player, that tells you something. That's something that historically has meant a lot. Caden Curry, we haven't talked specifically about, but I mean, he's kind of in a similar boat to Kenyatta Jackson, where it's like, okay, finally now, can he take that next step and go from like solid backup to, I don't know if, can you be a Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau player? I don't know if that's a realistic expectation, but can you take an intermediate step to get some to most of the way there?
It was interesting when he was talking because he's in the same boat as Kenyatta Jackson, CJ Hicks. They're all fourth-year guys. Mm-hmm. They all could have left. Mm-hmm. They're all still here. And what Caden Curry says, I love Ohio State and I love Coach Jay. I didn't want to go. Mm-hmm. Like this is where I want to be. And that's what the other two guys said as well. Like this is where they want to be. So when you've been waiting and biding your time, and why they played some. It's like, why didn't you play more? It's like, well, it's hard to get in front of Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau.
As it turns out, they're pretty good.
Please understand this. So if you're that patient and that hungry, like once you get to the buffet, don't you just hammer it? Like 3 plates. Like I need. You get some help with a third plate. Like they're ready to go. So then it becomes skill and execution. But like the desire and the want to is all there.
It's all about skill and execution.
Don't fill up on bread.
Don't fill up on bread. Save some room for the bathtub full of ice cream. That's an old Columbus tip for you. Anyone else? Those were the guys that we saw come out. Anyone else that got talked about that you thought was noteworthy?
No, because I think we pretty much covered everybody. Although Larry Johnson did say he was asked about the younger defensive tackles, the guys that we haven't really seen yet. And he's like, they're all coming along. And they do need like Will Smith. You mentioned Jason Moore, Eric Mensah. Maybe Will Smith and Eric Mensah more than anybody too, because they played nose tackle last year. And one of the questions is who is behind Caden McDonald. And I keep saying look to the portal perhaps. Yeah. And how hard they look is going to depend on I think those two guys.
Yeah. Is the backup nose tackle on this team right now, and that's sort of an open question, which will get sorted out somewhat throughout spring ball, to the spring game on the 12th of April, and then possibly through the transfer portal after that. So Lots to talk about the next few weeks. We'll have plenty more coverage. Wednesday is Pro Day here inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center with a bunch of former Buckeyes putting on a show for the NFL scouts and coaches and all that kind of stuff. I saw Travion Henderson and Cody Simon down there earlier. It's kind of been old home week here the last couple of days. You've sort of saw Mecca Abuka out here working yesterday. We talked about that on yesterday's show. So yeah, lots of familiar faces in here as Ohio State, and also a big recruiting week as well. There were a bunch of high-profile recruits in here as well. So going to be lots to talk about this week at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there as well, all to make you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.